Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Package Group Weekly Sync for January 13th, 2020. I'm going to kick it off with the agenda. It looks like it's a whole heap of stuff from me here. So first off, people might be interested in this Rails application performance training. I've linked to that in the agenda. If you click into there, Craig, I think I'm linking directly to Craig's comment there. Let's see. There's a survey in there if people are interested in adding their own responses. Seems like something that'd be interesting for people if you want to get into it. Cool. It's sort of optional, but something useful. Moving on to the next thing here. Workflow verification step is now optional. There was a change made to the handbook. So if you feel like you want to verify that everything's been deployed effectively, great. But it's now optional as far as our workflow goes. Cool. GraphQL has helped teams disconnect from front end and back end work. This is a link to our company retro. I definitely want to investigate this sooner rather than later, depending on what our product priorities are. I think I need to discuss generally with everyone, including Tim, to work out when we can start working on this, but I'd prefer to work on this soon. Nick, do you want to verbalize your comment there?
Sure. So there's already an issue for this that I think Steve created. There's a link to it in the docs, and maybe it's worth moving that into scheduling because I don't think it is right now, and then allowing anyone or any back-end engineer to pick it up and have a go.
Yeah, this doesn't have any workflow label on it at all. So we definitely need to do our usual run it by everyone, have back-end engineers look at it, flesh that issue out so that we have something that we can execute on. So I'm going to add workflow scheduling to that, just so that we can start working on it per our usual workflow. So that'll appear in our workflow scheduling list. So if backend wants to take a look at this, make sure Tim's seen it. Whoever wants to ping Tim and Ian, you see that there. This is sort of an API thing. I don't know if it impact directly with users, but maybe take a look at it would be cool. Steve, David, or Nick, whoever wants to ping Tim on that would be good. Yeah. Anything else we want to talk about here? Yep. Okay. Go, Nico.
Just a +1 to GraphQL.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely feel like this because we've certainly had the experience where front end peeps are hammering through stuff and then they're waiting on like cross-functional support, which I think we've been doing better at recently. Gigi's been helping out a fair bit with some cross-functional requests, which is awesome. But we remember, I think, for our team, which is not unique, but it's a little more unusual at GitLab, is we have three-way cross-functional because we have front end, back end, and back end Rails and back end Go, right? So we have multiple different directions of support there. So I think we still need to maintain that cross-functional support, but this could be really helpful for people. Who's gonna ping Tim on this?
I can do it. It's fine.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Okay, moving on. Moving to async issue updates instead of Geekbot. This would mean only things you need help on, or merge parrots, which we all enjoy our merge parrots. So I don't want that to go away because it's fun. So only things you need help on, so blocking stuff or cross-functional requests or blocking things. Successes, aka got something merged, which is exciting, would be in Geekbot, and everything else would just be in issue updates. There is an issue that I should have linked to here in our team board, our team issue project, I guess it is. I want to get people's thoughts here. David, do you want to wait? Yeah, David, do you want to verbalize that?
Yes. Could we have an empty stand-up if you have some work ongoing, you don't need for help and you don't have any merge parrot, so you don't have anything for the stand-up? That would be the...
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we still have other stuff in the stand-up, like, you know, something fun you did last night. You've got, what are you working on today? I think that's fine. What did you do yesterday? You know, there's a potential there where you don't have anything specific to update, but they would be in the issue at that point, right?
Yep.
So technically, what I'm trying to do is reduce the duplication of having, oh, I'm updating here, and then are we updating it in the issue? Are we letting our customers and other people that are following issue know what's actually happening? So I'm trying to avoid the situation where we're, instead of actually updating issue where everyone can collaborate on that update and understand where the issue's at, we're just putting it in Geekbot and it just goes into our channel. So I feel like there's actually a gap there, but I don't want people to have to do it in two places, right? So if you're updating the issue of saying, hey, we haven't made any progress today, or, you know, still waiting on blah today or whatever, that will be in the issue, not in the Geekbot stand-up. So technically your stand-up is still a thing, but it just doesn't get put in Geekbot. So yes, Nico.
Yeah. So what about cross-stage work? Because this is it will be our package workflow. But say, for example, that I'm doing an MR for GitLab UI. I wouldn't add stuff in the issue, progress in the issue, or if I do is outside of our eyes, and maybe Nick will be interested in knowing that this component is being worked on or it's worked, or even Ian or even Tim. Do we still put those at the stand-up, or we just neglect them, or?
I mean, it's a good question. I'm not really sure. I think if you're working on stuff outside of what we would be tracking as a team, stuff that's in our milestone or issues that are labeled with DevOps package or group package, I think you might want to put those in. Like I would want to, as a, you know, as a manager, I'd want to know that we're working on this other stuff. Not because I'm like, oh, I've got to figure it all out or get up in your face about it or anything like that, because it's fine. More like, oh, okay, that's interesting that someone's working and contributing to this other project, and maybe I go look at the project from time to time to see where it's at and understand what's going on. Like, but from the standpoint of like having to put it in there, I'm not sure. We could go either way. Why don't we just say we'll try it, put them in, and if it's a pain, we can not do it. I don't know. What do you think? Cool. Steve?
There we go. Yeah, I think like I like this idea, but like one thing that I like think about is that sometimes if it's like the main issue, especially if it's a very public issue, if I'm just posting an update every day, I guess my fear is that like some people might just start like, you know, if they say, if they see my update is like worked on this today, going to work on this tomorrow, and then someone's like, oh, when you work on this, like blah, 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 like kind of discussing some details that maybe are not something I need to be concerned with at the moment. You know, I'm not going to like not respond, but I feel like certain types of discussions might just slow things down that are not completely necessary. Like, I don't know if I'm phrasing this right, but hopefully that kind of makes sense. Or it's just creating kind of like extra paperwork almost because people are asking for clarifications on things that are still in progress to an extent.
Okay. Well, but go ahead, Nico. You have a thought already typed.
Yeah, so I was just saying that I think it is a legit concern, and I'm seeing this even inside MRs with other GitLabers. It's like somebody pulls in somebody else, and then this discussion goes on, and now everything needs to wait until an answer is coming from 3 or 4 hopes, and this slows things a lot. But I think as well that this shouldn't be like a cause for not giving update and not be transparent. Maybe we just need to find a way to do both, to achieve both at the same time.
Well, and the other thing I would say is like in scenarios where you're in where you're like updating an issue, and I'm thinking of the issue. I think Steve, you mentioned in the chat we had in the issue about this idea. You sort of were worried about some other things there, but if I remember correctly. But I think with this type of thing, you're still a DRI. So if someone comes along and says, hang on, you should think about this as well, that can be really valuable. We might end up with a better solution that way, right? So I don't think we want to prevent that. And if it's, I think Dave has actually been doing these async updates to issues already. And so I think the potential is there for that to happen, but I think there's the potential there to actually learn useful things from that engagement as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm like having a hard time phrasing is I don't want to say that like I don't want feedback or possible suggestions that would lead to improvements. It's more of a
it's so you
preventing,
you so hate having collaboration and good conversations. It's just
yeah, preventing things from going off on tangents unnecessarily would be kind of more a way to phrase it. And I think that most GitLabbers might understand that mindset of, if we kind of go off on a different idea, let's just create a different issue and address it later. But if it's like a wider community issue with a lot of people interacting, they may not realize that that's how the conversations can take place. And I just don't want to like cause anything to be like not addressed.
Yeah, and I think I would just echo what Nico said there. I think the risk to transparency and collaboration by not doing this is because we're not doing this right now for the most part, with a couple of exceptions maybe, is that we miss the opportunity to learn new things and to collaborate in a transparent way. And I think one of the things that we often say is, following our values can be hard, but that's not a reason to not follow them. I know that you personally are quite transparent and collaborative, Steve, so I don't mean to suggest you're not, but I think in that scenario, we could certainly just, okay, let's get someone else involved. Let's branch it off to a separate thing and just say, hey, this is how we usually handle this stuff. But like keeping an eye to moving forward and being a bias to action and all that sort of thing. Cool. But I think this is a totally valid concern. I don't mean to dismiss the concern because I think it's a fair concern. But my guidance there would be to just move forward and say, hey, we're not going to wait for this conversation to go over a week and then maybe finish working. Let's create a new iteration or something like that.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do this change. I like the idea. It's just more of a making sure we're aware of the concerns.
May I report an experience about open source and this? So I found out that, for example, if an open source project, I go in and I close an issue and say, I didn't receive any answer in 30 days, I'm going to close this and not work on this. I am more likely to receive a response, be it emotional or dictated or real. Comparing that if I configure a bot and goes in and says, this issue has been stale for 30 days, I'm going to close it in a week, and then the bot a week later close it. And when there is the bot doing this kind of stuff, you receive much more legit concerns. So if you have a strong motivation to comment, you're still reading the message that the bot is giving you, but you don't have, especially if you have the issue, or maybe this is less for us. Like if somebody closes your issue, you feel like a little bit threatened and you tend to answer even if it's not adding value. So maybe a bot could help us in this. I know that is additional work, but just food for thoughts, maybe.
So are you saying that having the bot automatically say messages is actually a better option than just personally typing in something? Is that kind of message you're trying to get across?
Yeah, not in practicality. Clearly, it's harder to have a bot that does stuff, at least in the beginning. But I think it helps. Like it's more a status update for real.
Oh yeah. So I think the way I would think about this is like we have a standard format where we just paste in the format of what's going on. We're not like just typing out a message, and that's I saw one of David's issue updates. And just make it a standard format. You're basically pasting in an update, and I don't mind if it's like really concise. It's really just even if it's just like, hey, I think I'm at this point and I'm 20%, 80% done, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing I did today. It's like effectively the same information that we're sharing in our Geekbot right now. But if we make it sort of a standard format, I think maybe that could, you know, go part way in both direction there, make it a little more like a formal thing where maybe we get better engagement, which is what I'm hearing you suggest from the bot experience. Yeah, all right. So I think in the issue we're discussing this, we probably just come up with a sort of a format we want to use and then go ahead with that. Unless there are any concerns. Does anyone else have any concerns they want to raise? I'll put it all in the issue too, but. Yep, cool. And then next update, our compa is being finalized for everyone who started before November 1st. People started after, they'll be reviewed in the next 6 to 8 months. Just an update, nothing to really discuss there too much, and obviously discussing it much more is probably not practical for a live stream recorded call. We could talk about it all individually in one-on-ones, but suffice it to say that'll be updated. We'll all learn, you know, when that comes out, what those changes are. So just wanted to let people know that that is an ongoing process. Okay, over to you, Nico.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if this is good here or is better in the retro. So the quick overview is that I noticed that there is a lot of movement on front-end MR right now, based on how we are changing our standards. So I mentioned this already, but a front-end MR as a peer review, a maintainer review, most likely unless it's test a UX review. In Fits UI, there is copy review, and optionally there is QA and docs review. And this is a lot of moving parts. And especially if the person appointed to the review feels that is necessary to pull in the expertise of somebody else, this like spreads around like a net, and any slowdown them are merging by far. I'm not saying that this shouldn't be the case, it should be the case, but I just wanted that, like, is it known? So maybe we can plan around it or take it in consideration, or if anybody has any thought and encounter this or know a better way to handle this, please let me know.
How much of this is different from the backend process?
Backend, you would have the like the peer review or the initial review. Then you'd have the maintainer review, and you would optionally have a docs review. Those are probably the majority
database.
of them. Oh yeah, and then there's a database review depending on the change.
I think the difference is the UX and copy review, and any meaningful feature on the front end is going to have those, right? While on the back end, you may doing an API change and that doesn't have any backend, or maybe docs review.
Well, our API changes for backend should have a UX review from our team. Remember, we agreed that a while ago. So, you know, if we have anything interacting with users, it should include a review of UX to make sure that it's satisfactory. I don't think that's formalized. I think that's something that we sort of decided around making sure that we weren't going to get into a position where someone had done a bunch of work or some work on an API endpoint and that just wasn't acceptable from a UX standpoint, right? So it sounds like the copy review, are all of these like single path? Like, is this at all sequential? One goes to the next, goes to the next type scenario?
Well, sometimes, no, they can go in parallel, but UX and copy review may change the code. UX may change more the code, copy is mostly standalone, but UX can change the copy. So yeah, there is a little bit of going on there. In an ideal world, we would have the copy defined before, but that's not always the case, nor always possible.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that seems a little frustrating. to have like going through multiple steps that can change the code. Is this recently changed, or has this been the process that you had for a while?
I think recently we put more focus, more attention to the UX and the copy. At least this is like the direct experience. Maybe Ian has better knowledge here if some process changed.
Yeah, on the UX side of things, we've tried to get more involved in the review process, especially interacting with, for us, it's Axel for the UI copy, to make sure it's getting reviewed during each MR. So it's kind of, from what I understand, it was kind of always expected, but we're trying to actually make sure it happens.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I think the other thought I had here was the peer review. Is that sort of internal to the team? Do you find people struggle with context in doing those peer reviews?
It depends on the MR. If I know that there is a eye context needed, I always send it towards Nick or a reviewer that is like routinely reviewing our code. And I think Nick applies the same strategy, but.
Yeah, I do the same as well. Like if it requires package knowledge, then I'll just send it to Nico. Otherwise, I just throw it out to whatever the review bot says. The other thing that I was going to say here is that I tend to not group documentation changes in the same MR. And at least that means that any front end work doesn't necessarily require a documentation review or anything like that. I tend to do a follow-up MR for those most of the times. And I feel like personally, that seems to work for me.
Yeah, I think it's something that we tried with this Docker container expiration policy recently. I'm not sure it worked out because we do have an issue, but we still wrote documentation in other MR, I think. But I guess that the process, the common process is to write the docs inside the MR that brings the functionality. At least this is the expected. So you need to explain, look, there is another issue and we are going to do this there.
Yeah, I think I'd really want to challenge that, just because if you go watch Sid and the chat that Sid and Christopher did last week, like it doesn't sound like as an organization we're really doing a good job with iteration in some scenarios. Like one of the things in Sid's original office hours and iteration was to release the docs before the thing's even done, right? See what feedback you get from that process. And that's totally in line. I mean, I guess I'm not suggesting that it's a blanket statement that we can apply anywhere, but I feel like if there are blocking changes and that every sort of review you go through for an MR change requires all of these steps and all of these people, I can't see how we can be like getting stuff done quickly. So it sounds like having a separate MR, even if you did it first, right, or last, or whatever, for the documentation is one useful step. Sounds like Nick's doing that already, which is probably a good idea. And you could put that out first and try Sid's, just put it in the why explanation of why you're doing that MR first, because Sid said iteration. But yeah, I think this is a good thing to chat about. How often are you seeing this really cause delays though, Nico, I guess is the other thing I'm interested in.
Recently more, and that's why I wrote it out now. But it may be due to the fact that I'm doing more like UI functionality now compared to mostly backstage work from before. So it may just my skewed perception, but I thought it was worthwhile to have a discussion around it.
Yeah, definitely. What percentage would you say feeling like it is significantly slowed down or noticeably slowed down?
Well, before I had normally an MR merged in 1.5 weeks, and now, well, with the holiday, so that's a bit skewed. I had also 3 weeks, 1 month for an MR to go in, but there is the holiday in between, so I will refrain to give precise number until later on.
Yeah, this is worth following up on. I mean, the holiday has been difficult for everyone, right? Because we've all been out at some level, and then all the maintainers are out, and et cetera, et cetera. So that would definitely give a different perspective on how long things have taken. I wrote off December and a little bit of January for that reason, in terms of getting real accurate representations of how we're working right now. So definitely keep an eye on this. It's worth tracking. And I would say just preemptively do what Nick's doing, either create a second MR after the fact or preemptively do the MR for documentation. I would say just because it was specifically touched on by Sid, maybe worth throwing the MR for documentation in first. I think that's not a bad idea. Let's see.
I can also jump in and have a conversation with Axel and see if there's a better way that we can more efficiently kind of rope the UI text and UX reviews together so that that in and of itself doesn't cause as big of a delay. I'll see if there's a more efficient way we can do that.
Yeah, it's maybe worth talking to some of the other people as well, Ian, because there's a bunch of product designers and tech writers around who are dealing with all this stuff. So there might be other ideas that we could start implementing if it's helpful. I'll leave it up to you though. I know you know how to do that. I'm just sort of wanted to acknowledge there's probably a lot of people sort of trying to find strategies around blocking or delaying sort of processes that we have, and we should. Let's follow up with this. When do you feel like you want to follow up on that? Ian, when do you think you'll have time to chat with Axel about it or whoever?
I will try to have a response by the end of the week, probably sooner, but I'm not sure Axel's availability right now.
All right. Well, if you can maybe just schedule a chat and let us all know when you've scheduled the chat, that would be good. I just want to get some answers on this as quickly as we can, so that because this is a bit of a concern. Cool. And we're at time. Look at that. We went the whole time this time. It's crazy. Anyone want to bring anything up quickly before we wrap it up?
If we have time, we have that tiny proof of concept demo to do. If we don't have time, we can postpone it to another event.
I think we have Think Big on Wednesday. Is there time to put it in there rather than in here? Yeah, so why don't you chat with Ian about just putting it on the schedule and Think Big. Just we don't have time right now, and we're already over time GitLab terms anyway. So yeah, that'd be awesome. Just chat with Ian and put it on the schedule for Think Big if there's time on that schedule. Cool. All right. Thanks everyone.